Good afternoon. Welcome to my channel, High School Literature, where all we do here is nothing but analyze works of literature from the perspective of students who are in secondary school or who are in high school. In our last video, we looked at the definitions of literature, then we looked at the reasons to study literature, and a couple of things here and there. This video, we will try as much as possible to look at some of the major elements of literature. We'll be looking at four major elements that you find in virtually every work of art: poetry, prose, and drama. So these four elements are very, very vital, very, very important in literary endeavor. Your exams are designed in such a way that nobody will be asking you what are these elements of literature. However, when it comes down to analyzing works of literature, it is expedient and it is expected that you will be able to use these terminologies appropriately and effectively. Okay, let's start with setting. Now, what is setting? Setting answers to the question of where and when. Answers two questions: where and when. Where was a work of art set? What is the information about the background, about the location that we can get access to? And then what time frame was that work of art set in? Okay, so setting answers the question where and when. Some have come to define or to explain setting to mean place and time. Okay, whatever definition sits well with you, there is no problem. But bear it at the back of your mind that every work of art is set in place and in time. Every work of art answers the question of where it was set and when it was set. Now, I explain a little bit of this as we go on. Now, setting as concerns where refers to the physical location that a work of art takes place. The physical location, the ambience, the topography, the geography, the location, the landscape, the physical things that you can find in a particular location. All of these things refer to setting as concerns location. Okay? A work of art can be set on a mountain top, it can be set in a valley, it can be set in a forest, by the river bank, it can be set on land, it can be set in the air, it can be set even on the sea or even under the sea. When you look at some of the works that you have to analyze in your literature, okay, poetry, prose, and or drama, you will begin to take note of the fact that certain things are mentioned, certain indices, certain locations are mentioned, okay, howbeit in a very subtle manner. So you must be able to locate these things and then accurately predict and tell us that this work was set by the riverside. So you look at a work like Kofi Awoonon's The Sea Eats the Land at Home. Okay, the location is actually in an African setting, in a village setting, because the word village and some other indices of village life, of a lack of development, are mentioned in this poem. Setting in terms of time refers to those intangible things that you cannot touch, okay, but they exist and they define how a work of art actually goes. So when you are talking about the atmosphere, you talk about the climate, the weather, you talk about the cultural context, you talk about the social, the economic, the political, even the religious situation that underpins the writing of a work of art. These will refer to setting in time. So a work can be set in the 19th century, the 20th, the 21st, the 11th, the 12th, the 13th century. When you want to understand the time that a work is set, sit down, relax, and begin to look for the indices and indicators of time in that work of art. When you look at another poem like Piano and Drum, indicators of time equally exist in this work of art. So you talk about village, you talk about huntsman, you talk about, all of these things are simply clues that the literary artists or the poets leave behind in the weaving of this work of artistry. Once again, setting answers to two questions. It answers the question of where that is the location, and then when, the time it was written. Number 2, let's look at plot. Now, what is plot? Aristotle describes plot as the soul of tragedy. In other words, it simply means that plot is the most important piece that you find in literature. So, plot as against the storyline is quite distinct, and I'll come to this later on. Now, E.M. Forster also talks about plot. E.M. Forster says that plot is based on a cause and effect variable. So there must be a cause, there must be an effect. In other words, there must be an action, there must be a reaction or a counteraction. When you look at these two definitions or these two descriptions about plot, it simply tells you one thing, and that is the fact that plot can be described as the most important incidents that you have in a work of literature. When you contrast that with the storyline, a story can run, you can tell virtually everything about the story, both the important, both the non-important, both the non-essential. All of these are found in a story. But in a plot, something major, something very, very interesting will have taken place, and that will lead to a series of action. Take a look at a work like Macbeth, for example. Macbeth returns from a war with his very good friend Banquo, and he is met by 3 witches who tell him that he will be promoted and then he will become king hereafter. That was the very cause of the downfall of Macbeth. If he had not encountered these 3 witches, it would not have set a series of reactions in motion, because at the end of that, he gets back home, he is promoted by King Duncan, he tells his wife about the predictions and about his promotion, and then the wife begins to sow seeds and begins to water these seeds, and these things grow up to become something that eventually involves many of these characters. So plot may be described as the arrangement of incidents, the most important incidents in a work of literature. Now, plots, there are 2 types of plots. You have the linear plot, you have the episodic plot. The linear plot runs in a linear chronological manner. So you have the first event, the second, the third and fourth and fifth, and so on and so forth. So you have a chronology. It follows in that sequence, that sequential order. If something happens, it leads to something, it leads to something, it leads to something else. That is a linear plot structure. Most of the work of art that we read, they are actually linear in nature. Now you have the episodic plot structure, or the disjointed or distorted plot structure. In this instance, events do not run in a chronology. You have a distortion of time. So a story can begin from the end and end in the beginning. A story can begin in the middle and then go to the beginning and then come to the end. You have a distortion of time, and that is solely at the discretion of the literary artist. But these kind of stories actually are the ones that get to me. I love stories like that because it affords me the opportunity of sitting back to relax, to digest the information that the literary artist has put out there. We have 5 different levels in plot. The very first level is called introduction. The introduction in plot basically refers to that stage where characters are introduced, either by virtue of their name or the role they play or what they say. We get to meet with these characters, as the case may be, based on what people have said about them, what they have said about other people, the situation that happens to them, and so on and so forth. So we get to meet with them firsthand. The second stage in plot is what you know as the rising action. In the rising action, things begin to heat up at this point. You have conflict between characters. Now, what is conflict? Conflict may be described as the opposition of 2 antagonistic forces. So when 2 forces cannot agree or cohere together, what we have is a conflict. All of this is found in the rising action. You can have conflict within an individual. He's confused, he doesn't know what to do. Should he go left? Should he go right? Hamlet actually has a case like this. There's conflict within Hamlet. Should he kill his uncle? Should he defy the killing of his uncle? When you read your work of literature, look out for incidents where you have conflict, because at that point, actions are beginning to rise. The third stage in plot, in the building or in the weaving of a nice plot, is what you know as the climax. The climax is the height, is the highest point in a work of literature. It is a peak. It is a point of reversal. It is that point at which you have the greatest level of excitement and suspense, the greatest level of action. It is at this point that things come to a head. Everybody, a lot of things begin to happen at this point in time. Characters get to a point of no return at this point. That is the climax. Now, after the climax, you have the falling action. At the falling action, the activities and the conflict begin to de-escalate. The actions here, the activities begin to simmer down. They begin to, after you've had the eruptions and the explosions and all manner and all sorts here and there, tension begins to go down at the level of the falling action. And then you have the last level known as the conclusion, the resolution. So at this level, the literary artist begins to tie up every loose end in his work of literature. So that is all about plot. You can get to apply this to the poems, the plays, and the work of fiction that you have read. The third element of literature that I would like to look at in this video is character. Character answers the question who. So who are the people involved, or who are the personages involved in this work of fiction, in this poem, or in this play? Now, every literary artist is at liberty to use whether human characters or non-human characters in a reading of his or her write-up. So a character may be described as a human being or a non-human element. Characters basically are human elements and or non-human elements that populate a work of literature. So you could have them as human beings, spirit beings, animals, trees, and all sorts. You could even have them as non-living elements like tables, chairs, and stones, and all of these things. However, at that point, the literary artist must be able to give a voice to them. Okay, so when a table, a chair, and all of these things have a voice given to them, have a role to play, a specific role to play in the work of literature, then you can refer to them as characters. And a very good example, is Beauty and the Beast. At the point in time in the palace, you have human beings who became turned into candlesticks and dressing tables and all sorts, non-living elements, and they were able to make conversation at certain points in the weaving of that story. Another example is George Orwell's Animal Farm, where you have both human elements and animal elements having interactions and conversing. Initially, there was a conflict, between the animals, spearheaded by Napoleon the pigs, and then against Mr. Jones and people that he was able to get to follow his backing. But then when you come towards the end of that novel, you find out that the animals stand in awe, they stand in amazement, they stand in wonder, in confusion, because they take a look at the human beings and they take a look at the pigs and they find little or no difference between both of them. Of course, we all know that Animal Farm is an allegory. Animals don't talk. You cannot converse with human beings except and until the literary artist wills it to be so. Now, there are different kinds of characters. You have major characters, you have minor characters. Major characters are characters that play major role in a work of literature. They are given more prominent roles to play in a work of literature. The minor characters play very, very little and almost insignificant roles in the work of literature. That is all about major and minor characters. Characters could also be rounded, dynamic, or static and flat. So round, dynamic, static, and flat. I've seen a bit of writings here and there on the internet, and I'm personally convinced that a rounded character is very, very much similar with a dynamic character. So I'll take these two together. Now, who or what is a rounded character? A rounded character is a character that undergoes change and undergoes metamorphosis. A rounded or dynamic character undergoes change, undergoes metamorphosis, undergoes transformation. At a point, he or she, in the work of literature, might have lived all his life in ignorance. But after meeting and encountering certain events, certain people, there is a change in his or her thinking, in his or her orientation. He's able to make well-informed decisions, and then based on that, sort out problems that you find in that work of literature. So a rounded character undergoes change. He is well developed. He or she is well developed by the literary artist. He or she is rounded. You get to see his or her reaction to different things, and they are usually well informed, well thought of, and they are products of deep thinking. Now, a flat character or a static character is the exact opposite of a rounded or dynamic character. These character types do not undergo changes. Irrespective of whatever happens to them, they remain constant throughout. They don't change. They don't undergo any metamorphoses. Whether good or bad fortune, they remain the same. Their actions are very much predictable. Okay? They remain the same. Someone like Shylock, when you call someone a Shylock, you know the person is out for money, is out for blood, is out for vengeance. That's who they are. They don't change. Characters could also be either protagonist or antagonist. Now, a protagonist is a character that takes center stage. A protagonist inspires people. A protagonist has virtues of valor, virtues of courage, bravery, skill, wit, smartness, enviable character traits that people seek and hanker after. Such a character type is usually also almost given a major prominent role in a work of literature. The protagonist stands tall. He represents everything positive, everything good, everything that stands for justice, equity, and progress. Now, the antagonist is the direct opposite of the protagonist. The antagonist, as the name implies, antagonizes the protagonist. He or she stands in direct confrontation and direct conflict, as when it comes to the protagonist. So the antagonist represents everything evil, everything terrible, everything horrible, every vice you can ever think about. The antagonist never changes. They are always schemers, pretenders, and they are almost always out for blood. Someone like Iago in Shakespeare's Othello is an example of an antagonist. He antagonizes a lot of people because he's all out to bring down Othello. And then number 4, I'll look at the theme. Now, the theme basically refers to the central message and the central idea you have in a work of literature. So every literary artist wants to pass a message across. Rather than come out to carry placards and start shouting and making some noise and all of that, literary artists sit down, create characters, create scenes, create interrogations, create interactions, and give these characters voices, so that as these characters begin to speak, you can sense the tone, you can sense the message that the literary artist intends to put across, out there. Naturally, every work of art that you will read will have a theme, at least one theme. Many times you have several themes. So, take for example, Alex Laguma's A Lemon Orchard. You find things like racial discrimination, apartheid, injustice, alienation, and so on and so forth. And this is not quite surprising, because many works of art that come from South Africa are reflecting of the social, political, economic situation that you have in South Africa as dictated by apartheid. Okay? You need to read about apartheid if you want to understand and enjoy Alex Laguma's The Lemon Orchard. Another very good example is Oliver Goldsmith's His Stoop to Conquer. Which parades themes like class dichotomy, mischief, mistaken identity, and so on and so forth. So, once again, these 4 major elements of literature answer to different questions. The setting answers the question of where and when. The plot answers the question of what. The character answers the question of who. And then the theme answers the question of why. I do hope that you've learned something in this video. If you agree with me or you disagree with me, I would like you to leave your comment in the section below so that we can get to rub minds and interact. Okay? Please like my video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thank you so very much. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.